All right. I think at this point I need to build in lower subdivision levels because when you work purely in Dynamesh, it at 550,000 polys, it becomes unwieldy, right? You try and make large movements, you end up with all these lumpy surfaces, and you really just need to retopo at this point. Because what you want is something clean. You don't want something lumpy. All this little detail we can get back when we come back into ZBrush. So I'm going to subdivide up once. I'm going to step down in my subdivisions. I'm going to freeze subdivision. Go into Dynamesh. Let's drop this to 128. Remesh. I'm going to want to watch in between my toes. I also want to watch these areas in here, that this doesn't weld too closely. I'm at 137,000 polys. Let's drop this to 64. Actually, I'm sorry. Let's unfreeze our subdivision levels, then drop to 64. Why not using ZRemesh, Damien, and well, here's the thing, is that ZRemesher is really happy at like the, I don't know, 1,000 to 30,000 poly range. It's comfortable handling that much topology. When you get into 100,000, 150,000, we could be sitting here for 5 minutes waiting for it to remesh, and then we would likely end up with holes. So what I try and do is I try and strike a balance between, watching areas like this to make sure that they're not welding together in Dynamesh. And then if I have to go into ZRemesher, I will, right? But it depends on what I'm doing. But I usually leave ZRemesher to the last steps till I get underneath 100,000 polys. So I'm going to step up, step back down. So I'm at 137,000. Let's try going down one more time in Dynamesh. See if we can get away with it. It's not too bad. That's not too bad. I can live with that. Let's look at the mouth. I can live with that. All right. So now that I'm at $34,000, I'll go back down and use ZRemesher as soon as we're done with our projection. Yeah, honestly, it's kind of a lazy workflow if you think about it. I keep on bumping up my Dynamesh resolution to keep on adding stuff and building and building and building. And then I'm like, okay, well, finally now I need subdivisions. I'll have to do a little bit of cleanup and work backwards a little bit. But it allows me that time in the beginning of my sculpt to kind of just create, without thinking about the mesh too much. Getting the mesh out of the way. Yeah, right, for sure. All right, so now that we're down to 34,000 polys, let's go into ZRemesher. I'll probably want more snapping points in the face because I'm thinking about my reference mesh. I'm thinking about a sculptural mesh right now, but I'm mainly thinking about a reference mesh, right? So the body topology will be fairly light. The hands may be a little dense. The paws, the talons there. The face is most definitely going to be more dense than the rest of the character, and that's because we have more motion in this area. We have typically more detail we want to hold in this area. I have a question from Manuel. So you get to like 1 million, let's say with Dynamesh, then freeze, reduce the Dynamesh, redo, redyna, then unfreeze to get the projected details. Yes. And then when you get down to the tens of thousands of polys, you start using ZRemesher instead of Dynamesh. Awesome, man. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and employ the use of polypaint in ZRemesher to add density in this area. So let's hit our polygroups on. I'm going to mask out the head. And don't really need to mask out the feet. I'm just going to concern myself with the head. Turn RGB on, color fill object, clear the mask, and let's see, my target polygon count, I'm at 34,000 right now. I'll probably want to go to a quarter of that. So let's go to, well, 5 should be fine, but with the way that you try and figure poly count, and it's never really accurate with ZRemesher because you're using this automatic retopology to get, you know, some sculpturally ordered topology in there, and the way that I think about it, my brain is like, okay, well, I'm asking for 5. But that's 5 excluding the double density that I'm asking for in the head, right? So I'm probably going to get like 12,000 polys if I leave it at 5 right now. So I'm going to drop this to 2, and hopefully that'll get us between 6,000 and 8,000 polys. Ah, 8,700, not too bad. So as long as I'm in the ballpark. And let's check it out. It's not too bad. I'm not crazy about this being expressed in the topology, so I'm going to go ahead and smooth that down. Let's ZRemesh again. Simon has a question. When we were ZRemeshing, adding lower subdivisions to the first creature, I was getting a bit confused, but in the end, instead of freezing subdivisionals, I was duplicating a subtool, remeshing, dynameshing one subtool, then adding a sublevel and hitting projectile with it. Yes, you can. That works too. I mean, you know, it's like Manuel is saying. Manuel is saying, you know, whatever gets you there in the end, right? And that's absolutely true. So, I mean, honestly, for me to handle another subtool, for some reason the projection, I know it's using the same algorithm. When you're using freeze subdivision and you're projecting, it's using the same algorithm that's being used in subtool projection. But for some reason, it seems to work, like function better when it's within the same subtool. So you'll hit more misprojections when you're using another subtool, and I think there's just more room for error. So, I mean, I typically prefer to work this way, but honestly, that's what I was doing before I started employing freeze subdivision, right? The danger of using freeze subdivision is that some people will subdivide with freeze subdivision on, they'll start sculpting with freeze subdivision on, or they'll just be confused by freeze subdivision because it's kind of a weird, it's a weird function, you know, because you're like, okay, well, I have subdivisions, but I don't see them, right? And how does that all relate? You know, how do all the subdivisions relate? But yeah, Simon, that's totally fine. That's a long answer for your question, but yeah, my short answer is yes, that's fine. So let's unfreeze subdivision level. And we're going to wait a bit on this projection. So I guess while we're waiting on this projection, oh, I didn't have to wait too long. I thought we were going to be waiting for a while. ZRemesher looked like it was rearing up to do something spectacular.